pursue this tradition as exuberantly as a federal election, but without any attack efforts. There were many excellent candidates, but one candidate emerged victorious, John Wright. Mr. Chancellor, I have a special relationship with the Department of Chemistry, which trained one of our children, Lachlan, who went on to a PhD program in the Netherlands. This department produces terrific, well-trained and well-rounded students like John Wright. Earlier this year, he was Master of Ceremonies at a university event in which we celebrated with government officials the completion of a major renovation of our chemistry building, and he did just a superb job. So, Mr. Chancellor, it is with great pleasure that I present John Wright as this year's valedictorian.
Well, first of all, before I begin, I have to admit, this is the most nervous I've ever been. So, one of three things may happen, or all three. I may faint, I may cry, or I may throw up. But regardless, I hope I can just roll with it. And without further ado. Good morning to our President, Dr. Campbell, to our Chancellor, Peter Mansbridge, to the other distinguished guests on the platform, to the family and friends gathered here, and most importantly, to the grads of 2011. It's a great honor to stand here today in front of you. While honored to be here, I can't help but think what a funny thing it is, valediction. Even though I know what it literally means to say farewell, I have a hard time pinning down exactly what that farewell means for all of us. How does one say farewell to the most significant experience that they've ever had? You cannot simply say goodbye to running out of breath on your way to class, not because the walk was long, but because you knew almost everyone in your path and had to have that infamous, "Hi, how are you? Good, thanks, and you? Oh, I'm fine, thanks for asking." Drive-by, walk-by conversation. Every time. You cannot say good riddance to the experience of slaving over a degree for the past 4 or so years and then basking in the glory of that well-deserved grade, or not so well-deserved. You can't simply move on from your system of roommates, friends, and confidants, support system rather. These things, they take time. Time that we don't have today. And if you're like me, then none of this has really sunk in. I will not presume to be able to change that, but I hope that I can at least get us started. When pondering valediction, the phrase motion capture came to mind. It seemed appropriate, because this is what I thought a valedictorian should do, capture this moment. Once caught, I was to examine this moment from every angle and reflect on its significance. I soon realized that this wasn't going to work out. The issue, you see, is that the idea of capturing a moment quickly collapses in on itself. Once caught, it can no longer be described as motion, and thus the image cannot do justice to the living, breathing moment. And that's just the catch. To truly appreciate this time in our lives, to examine it with any sort of clarity, we must recognize that this moment is contingent on every other experience that we have had or will have. So the challenge was to think of different moments in my life that I could draw on at this time. It was a bit of a no-brainer to decide that the most appropriate topic for the valedictory address as we depart from university would be to talk about those moments where I've learned, and also what it was that I learned from them. If I had to describe what I've learned here, I would not talk about the classes that I've taken. What I've learned does not translate well into a 4.3 GPA scale. It does not look good on your CV, and it will not result in a distinguished title or any extra letters after your name on a business card. What I've learned is that empathy is the key to any good relationship, and that I have gotten to this point because I have been privileged throughout my entire life. So many people have given me so much, either directly or indirectly. As I said, this is something that was learned. It was not always so. When I was about 6 years old, a little bit of a family drama story for you, I began to resent my 3-year-old little brother, who happens to be in this audience today. I understand that this is common for siblings at this age, but at the time it felt like more than just a phase. I felt as though he was having everything handed to him, and that he didn't even realize it. I remember one incident in particular. He was whining and whining, probably just hungry, about how he didn't get what he wanted. I was terribly frustrated and decided that I would tell him exactly what I thought of him. I said, "You are a spoiled baby." Now, as a 3-year-old who was relatively new to the English language, he didn't fully understand what spoiled meant. He could barely even pronounce the word, though he knew enough that it wasn't a nice thing to say. So, like any good 3-year-old, he told Mommy. He stormed into the room where my mother was, and with tears in his eyes yelled, "Mummy, John just called me a boiled baby." Not to worry, our family managed to stay together through this trying time, and we've since made amends. You see, it took all the wisdom that comes with my great age for me to realize that I was quite a hypocritical little 6-year-old boy, and the hypocrisy continues to this day. You see, I now consider myself to be a boiled baby. I think that we all are to some extent. And I'm not saying this with the intention of scolding anyone, if you'll forgive the pun. What I'm getting at is that we've been so privileged in our time here at Mount Allison. And the unfortunate thing is that we may not even realize it. We've complained about our student-grade apartments. You know the ones. They have non-insulated walls, uneven floors, pipes that tick, creak, and leak. But if you speak to any of the grads here today who have had the opportunity to volunteer their time and travel with Habitat for Humanity, building homes for the less fortunate, they'll tell you what it truly means to not have adequate shelter. We've also complained about how much work we've had to do and how it's so hard to focus in our last semester of our last year of undergrad. But if you or anyone you know has had the opportunity to volunteer with the SMILE program, they will tell you that there are others who have not and may never have the same opportunities or abilities to learn as we do, yet they still make the most out of every day. We have even written the most heart-wrenching emails to our professors, you've heard the ones, pleading for extensions for our midterms and our papers because we have the sniffles. Though, I'm sure if you brought your compelling case to any of the students who traveled to Honduras with global brigades, they would tell you that our state of health is highly sought after and not to be taken for granted. Now, it's easy to say that I'm an improved individual if my point of reference is my 6-year-old self. So I decided to set the bar a little higher. And I drew a comparison to a more recent version of myself. It came about when I was trying to comprehend just how much time we'd spent here. You see, sometimes we get so caught up living deadline to deadline that we forget to stop and just grow. But grow we have. I think you would all agree that these past few years have been a whirlwind, and it seems as though it was just yesterday that we walked into this place. The only way that I was able to put the amount of time spent here into perspective was to imagine meeting up with myself from back in high school. So I drew up as much of my past self as I could. Well, I was a pretty okay guy back then, despite the pop collar and the blue hair. Yet, beyond whatever good or bad qualities I may have had, one thing was for certain. I was woefully inexperienced. I was concerned more with being understood than with understanding others. I didn't know what it actually meant to respect someone's opinion. Those 6-year-old traits of envy and judgment still lingered within me. What is it about these past 4 years that have finally, hopefully, brought me out of my childish self-centeredness? I think we all know the answer to that. The answer is you. It is you who inspired me through all your humanitarian, philanthropic, artistic, entertaining, scholarly, and athletic events and organizations with which you've taken part. It is the conversations that I've had with you, especially on matters where we've disagreed, that I've found that mutual respect gets you considerably further than simply having a good argument. It is you who, though completely incompatible on paper, have become some of my closest friends. You are the people who have shown me empathy, and when I opened up and showed you the same respect, you have transformed me. We have all improved in different ways, but we have all done it together. And what about extending our new and improved selves into the so-called real world? Are the qualities of our experience transferable, or must they simply be relegated to memory? Well, need I remind you of a quote that was on our Frost t-shirts? You know the one. It had that picture of the key and the ignition? Yeah. It said, "Can't stop this thing we started." I'll be the first to admit that this was nothing more than a tagline to me. I don't think I've worn the shirt very much since being here, to be honest. It didn't exactly resonate in my mind. But someone clearly knew better than I did, because in this moment, we are really rolling. And though this is a farewell, there's no end in sight. That 6-year-old little boy that I told you about had no idea of how privileged he was. He couldn't realize that he had two incredible parents who would sacrifice much for his well-being, or that his older siblings would be great mentors who he could emulate and look to for encouragement. Perhaps more importantly, he didn't realize that he was living in a free country like Canada, and that he would have the opportunity to attend the top undergraduate university in the nation. It is there where he and his peers would manage, in a relatively short time, to create a community amongst themselves that fosters goodwill and companionship, while it pushes its members to excel, and excel we have. Our stories are not the same, but one thing is for certain. We owe much to others and can take little credit for our own. The only credit will be given to us when we continue this tradition of support and encouragement. On that note, now that we officially have our degrees and our hoods and our tassels are on the left, I would ask that you resolve to thank those people in your life who have made this moment possible for you. And further, I would challenge you to be that person for someone else, because it is in recognizing that we need others and in helping others when they need us that we will find true success. Now, I realize that this sounds like I've been standing up here and giving advice to a group of people who have the same amount of life experience as I do, if not more. But really, in my mind, I haven't given you any advice at all. I say that because this has merely been an iteration of what I've learned from each and every one of you. You are friends who I've loved, colleagues who I've respected, mentors who I've admired, and this has been a place that we have all called home. With that, I say farewell to Mount Allison. We are all better for having been acquainted with you. I hope that we continue on this path and that the people that we meet will be able to say the same thing about having known each and every one of us. Thank you.